Effie regarded the cathedral for some time, then glanced at Sunny with doubt. I know for a fact that nothing comes out alive from that temple. Are you sure that this is where you live? With a carefree smile, Sunny shrugged. The fact that Effie knew about the danger hiding inside the ruined church did not surprise him. Even if it was situated outside of her usual hunting grounds, she had extensive knowledge of the Dark City, some from her own exploration, some from sharing information with other hunters. Dead tired and longing to return to the peaceful silence of his home, he didn't waste any time and told her about the Black Knight who guarded the cathedral. The unruly huntress scratched the back of her head. So, there's a fallen devil inside. He's the roommate you were talking about? Sunny gave her a nod. The bastard endlessly patrols the ground floor and kills anything that comes through the doors. However, if we enter through the roof and stay hidden, we can reach my living quarters without any problem. More than that, nothing will bother us once we're there, because the bastard never comes that way and obliterates anything that tries. Effie was silent for a while, then grinned. So, you basically have a devil for a butler. Pretty smart, Sunny chuckled. Was that a compliment? For a doofus like you? Ah, there it is. Once they climbed up to the roof, there was a slight problem. Sunny failed to consider that the hole in the tiles that he used to enter the cathedral, while wide enough for his small frame, would be too tight for the tall and robust huntress to crawl through. Looking at the narrow gap between the massive plates of dark marble, Effie gave him a gloomy look. However, before Sunny could come up with an alternative plan, she simply bent down, grabbed one of the incredibly heavy plates, and moved it aside. The words died on his lips. Strong, so strong. I wonder who is stronger, she or the stone saint. Honestly, he wasn't sure. Before proceeding further, Sunny instructed Effie on how they were going to get her inside the hidden chamber, and watched as the huntress reluctantly dismissed her bronze armor. With only a short white tunic covering her lovely olive skin and abundant figure, she looked very, comely. For a moment, his displeasure of having someone intrude upon the secluded peacefulness of his lair evaporated, but only for a moment. Don't you get any strange ideas? Your armor is just too much of a risk. We can't allow ourselves to make any noise, that's all. Effie grinned. Strange ideas? Why are you talking about having strange ideas all of a sudden, huh, Sonny? He gritted his teeth, turned away to hide his blushing face, and crawled into the hole between tiles. Damn woman. Once they landed on the support beam of the cathedral, Sunny guided Effie's hands to rest on his shoulders. Although the sun was still high in the sky, there wasn't any sunlight around them. Only the floor of the ancient temple beneath them was bathed in it. But even then, large areas of the grand hall were drowned in deep shadow. Only it wasn't really shadow, it was darkness. Not one born from the absence of light, but true darkness, one which even his sight could not pierce. Sunny didn't know if it was summoned here by the Black Knight or simply obeyed him, but this was how the bastard had managed to sneak up on him unnoticed back when they first met. In any case, he had to guide Effie across the beams of the cathedral. One wrong step, and they would plunge to their deaths. What a bother. Feeling rather awkward because of how close their bodies were to each other, Sunny quietly sighed and took a step forward. It was hard to concentrate. Strange ideas? Who's having strange ideas? Not me. A few minutes later, they reached the hidden balcony behind the statue of the unknown goddess. Despite the fact that nothing out of the ordinary had happened, Sunny was rather on edge. Something told him that this was going to be a really long week. Once they entered his hidden chamber, Sunny informed Effie that she was free to create light and speak. Not wasting any time, the unruly huntress summoned a radiant memory and looked around with curiosity. The beautiful and spacious room that had once belonged to the priestess of this ancient temple was suddenly flooded with soft light. The intricate engravings on the walls created an atmosphere of sanctity and elegance. Here and there stood various pieces of furniture, most made out of opulent pale wood, with a few mismatched pieces that Sonny had scavenged from the ruins. Effie whistled. "Have to give it to you, Sonny. You sure know how to live in style. Who would have thought?" He smiled. "Jealous?" She sighed. "The important thing is that even if Gunlog tracks us here, none of his people would be able to enter. So we're indeed safe." Listen, lightly disappointed, Sonny shrugged. "Well, make yourself at home. I'll show you the back exit and other stuff later." With that, he furtively glanced around and tried to quickly hide a few things from sight to make his home more presentable. If he had known that there was going to be a guest here, he would have cleaned up the mess a little in advance. Not that Effie paid it much attention. She walked around with curiosity, studying the engravings on the walls and ancient furniture. But then, suddenly, Sonny heard a loud giggle coming from behind. Turning around, he saw Effie standing in front of the wardrobe, hidden behind a stone panel. The wardrobe was currently open, showcasing the garments left behind by the priestess. The huntress looked at him with a strange smile. Why is she staring at me?" "What?" Effie shook her head. "No, nothing. It's just, you know, Sonny, when I first saw you, I thought, look at this tiny boy. He's just like a toy. You just want to dress him up like a doll and play with him." Sonny blinked a couple of times, then scowled angrily. "Who are you calling tiny? I'm not tiny in any way, you beanpole." Not paying him any attention, the huntress glanced at the wardrobe and giggled again. Then, suppressing laughter, she said, "Who knew that you are into playing another kind of dress-up, huh?" It took Sonny a couple of seconds to realize what she was implying. When he did, he turned bright red from outrage. The nerve, the gall, how dare she? "What are you talking about? Those aren't mine. The priestess who lived here before left them behind." Effie nodded a couple of times. Sure. You just happen to have a wardrobe full of pretty dresses. By accident. That's the truth. I never lie." She looked at him with a wide smile. "But of course, it must be the truth. I totally believe you. Definitely." Sonny stared at her with his mouth wide open, not knowing what to say. Effie, meanwhile, looked around and innocently fluttered her eyelashes. "But, Sonny, we have another problem." Gritting his teeth in irritation, he snapped. "What is it?" She lingered for a few moments, then said teasingly, "There's only one bed. Ah, what a predicament. Whatever should we do?" Sonny glared at her for a long time, then spat. "You take the damn bed. I'll sleep on the floor." With that, he turned away and tried to take a deep breath. Why did I ever agree to this? Women, damn women, they're the true terror. Indeed, this was going to be a very long week. After Sonny calmed down a little and had time to think about it, he realized that things weren't as bad as he had thought. Yes, living this close to the rambunctious huntress was a very special kind of trial, especially due to how much joy she seemed to derive from tormenting him. But there was one redeeming aspect to all of this, aside from the fact that he would get to constantly feast his eyes on. Wait, back to the topic. It was that Sonny was a nocturnal creature. He didn't have to sleep on the cold floor or interact with the vigorous huntress that much, because he would be asleep during the day and out hunting during the night. The window of time when they would both be awake and stuck in the hidden chamber together was not that large. More than that, Effie had brought enough food to satiate her unnatural hunger in that bottomless bag of hers, so he didn't even have to feed her. So hosting her was not going to be as bothersome as he had initially assumed. After showing the huntress around and enduring several more good-natured jabs, he finally had some time to himself. Finally, sitting down in a remote corner of the chamber, He closed his eyes and dove into the soul sea. As always, the tranquil sea met him with calming darkness and peaceful silence, not paying any attention to motionless shadows that stood at the edge of the visible part of it. Not even to gaunt and pitiful Harper. He walked over and stood beneath the black sun of his shadow core. Then Sunny summoned the stone saint. "Hey there, darling. Guess what? I brought dinner." Before commanding the memories he had purchased with the help of Kai down, he quickly glanced at the runes surrounding the taciturn monster. Shadow, Stone Saint. Shadow rank, Awakened. Shadow class, Monster. Shadow attributes, Mum Hondam Nen, Mum Hondam Nen. Shadow fragments, Mum Nen, Mum Hondam Nen. Only 6 fragments, and she was already so strong. He couldn't wait to see his monster grow even more ferocious. Not wasting any more time, Sunny summoned the first memory. A strange sword with a stupid amount of useless gems embedded into its blade for some idiotic reason, and handed it to the shadow. She took the sword without showing any emotion and ruthlessly shattered it with her gauntlets. Well, Sunny made a face. "Why, thank you, spell. I wouldn't have guessed if it weren't for you. So helpful." 2 torrents of ethereal sparks entered Stone Saint's body and were absorbed by the dark embers burning in the depths of the living shadow that hid in her body. "Modern Batten Warbit. Was it just him, or did the spell sound a bit hurt? Well, tough. I didn't hear you complaining when Neff was promising to rip you to shreds." He grinned and glanced at the runes again. Shadow fragments. Satisfied, Sunny summoned the next memory. The process repeated itself. Modern Bant. As the number of shadow fragments saturating the core remnants inside his pet monster grew, his mood continued improving. This was the best feeling ever. Shadow fragments, shadow fragments, shadow fragments, shadow fragments, shadow fragments, shadow fragments. Finally, after the 9th memory was consumed, the runes describing the number changed to 20 out of 200. The Stone Saint looked considerably stronger already. Remembering the changes that happened to his own body after his first few kills, Sunny could more or less gauge how much her condition has improved. The increment wasn't really that substantial, but in battle the tiniest advantage could often decide everything, especially considering that it was going to be doubled by the augmenting effect of his indispensable but impudent shadow. All of this was just a prelude anyway. The main event was yet to come. Full of anticipation, Sunny called the onyx armor down. If his calculations were correct, this relic alone should give the Stone Saint 12 shadow fragments, almost as much as the 9 lesser memories combined. The jet-black suit of ancient plate armor appeared in the air in front of him. Surrounded by the lightless vastness of the silent sea, the feeling of dark grace it emanated was even more pronounced. Sunny clicked his tongue. Ah, what a beauty! It was almost a shame to destroy it, almost. Slightly reluctant to part with the ancient armor yet, Sunny read the runes describing it. Stev was right. Even the spell couldn't make sense of the damaged memory. Memory rank, memory tier, memory type, unknown, memory description, burst army, shed own, memory enchantments, memory nindund redamit, memory rank, memory duod, memory dorm, memory tier, memory type, unknown, memory description, army, shed own, memory enchantments, mindwind redam. Many of the runes were missing, and those that did appear refused to coalesce into any sort of comprehensible words. However, Sunny did notice a few of the strange runes that made his head hurt, the same ones present whenever the spell mentioned the mysterious unknown. Just as I thought, the armor was clearly connected to the same tribe of nightmare creatures that the Stone Saint had belonged to before becoming a shadow. The origin of the strange living statues was tied to the unknown, so it was logical to assume that the onyx armor had something to do with them too. Well, no matter. He knew that this memory was severely damaged when he bought it. Sonny was never planning on using it anyway, only feeding it to the saint. Time for dessert. With a wide smile, he pushed the beautiful black armor to the stone monster. However, the smile soon froze on his face, because the stone saint did not move to take and shatter the armor like she did with all the other memories. Instead, she simply turned her head and looked at it. The hue of the crimson flames burning in her ruby eyes ever so slightly changed. It was almost as though they were filled with the tiniest shadow of sorrow. Come on, eat it. But no matter how much he tried to get the stone saint to destroy the armor, she refused. The living statue just stood there and did nothing. After a while, disappointed, Sonny stared at the onyx armor and sighed. Well, serves him right. To be honest, he had a slight inkling that this would happen. Nevertheless, Sonny had decided to buy the armor anyway. It's not every day that you stumble upon a Tier 6 fallen memory, even if it's damaged beyond your ability to repair. Perhaps he would donate it one day, if Nephis would actually manage to open the path to the gateway, and he would somehow find himself among those lucky few to reach it alive and become awakened. Until then, the awesome black armor was pretty much useless. With a deep frown, he left the Soul Sea and summoned it into existence. Soon, the armor appeared on the floor of the hidden chamber. Effie looked at it with interest. Wow, what is this? Sonny lingered for a long time and then finally answered, "A decoration, I guess." The huntress raised her eyebrows. "Really? Well, what are you staring at me for?" He gritted his teeth. A few awkward moments later, Sonny said, "Can you help me move it? It's too heavy for me to lift." With a rather unpleasant noise, the monster's head fell down. Sonny indifferently bent his arm and wiped the midnight shard on the sleeve of his armor, watching as the massive body slowly toppled over. Standing on the other side of it, the stone saint simply flourished her sword in and stopped it abruptly mid-swing, sending every drop of blood flying to the ground. Then she just stood there absolutely still, pretending to be a statue. Sonny sighed. "That's a cool trick. I should learn it." Honestly, cleaning his blade on the puppeteer's shroud was not very fair to the Tier 5 armor. He felt guilty. "Watch my back." With the taciturn shadow observing the surroundings, he summoned the prowling thorn and used it to recover the soul shards from the carcass. This was the fourth nightmare creature Sonny had killed this night. With the help of the stone saint, his hunts became much easier than before. Not even mentioning the fact that the shadow was as powerful as most of his marks. The mere fact that he had a partner to draw the enemy's attention away changed a lot of things. Sonny was somewhat capable of, but preferred to avoid engaging in direct battle with these abominations. His way of doing things was to strike from the shadows and, ideally, kill the enemy with a single strike. If everything went smoothly, the prey would never even see its killer. Of course, such a hunting method required a lot of cunning, patience, and preparation. He had to observe the enemy for a long time to learn its behavior and weaknesses. The confrontation itself took just a few seconds, but only because days had been spent in advance to make that immediate resolution possible. After hunting in that meticulous way for 3 months, Sonny felt strange, simply overpowering the monsters with brute force. The combination of Stone Saint's indomitable defense and his swift blade was nothing short of miraculous. It was almost like fighting side by side with Neph. Almost. With a sigh, Sonny threw the soul shards into his rucksack and stood up. He was facing a problem that he had never expected to face. It was honestly rather bizarre. He was running out of monsters to kill. Awakened nightmare creatures weren't that abundant in the dark city to begin with, let alone those whom he had already tracked, studied, and felt confident attacking. After tonight's massacre, pretty much every one of them was dead. Sonny had cleaned the house, but he was so much stronger now, so much more dangerous. With the help of the Stone Saint, maybe there was no need to be so cautious. No, this is how you get yourself killed. This was a dangerous mindset. Despite his recent growth, Sonny was still in no way the apex predator in the ruins. In fact, he was the opposite of that. Of all the creatures stalking these streets, he was the weakest. Pride is the gravest of all sins. Next thing you know, you'll be trying to hunt the fallen ones. Sonny would perhaps survive a confrontation with a fallen beast, maybe. But actually defeating one was a whole other conversation, and if he had the misfortune to stumble on something of a higher class, his chances of making it out alive would not be very high. He could start investigating one of the awakened creatures that he knew of, or simply go home. However, something was bothering Sonny. There was this feeling in his head that he had a seed of an idea, but then got distracted and failed to fully form it. What was I thinking about just now? Whether or not to hunt again tonight, how powerful he had become with the help of the shadow, how it was not very practical to wipe the blood with the sleeve of the puppeteer's shroud. Oh, right. Back when he saw the Stone Saint shake off the blood of her sword, he had thought that this would be a cool trick to learn. And at that moment, he got a feeling that he was onto something. I should learn it. I should learn it. Suddenly, Sonny's eyes became bright. If he could learn this trick from the Stone Saint, what else would he be able to learn from her? This shadow of his had an attribute called, which apparently meant that she was proficient in all forms of combat. Was there a better teacher for someone like him? The answer was no. With his technique stagnating because of the lack of guidance, there was no one better than the masterful Stone Saint to learn from. Suddenly excited, Sonny summoned the taciturn monster back into his shadow and headed home. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. By the time he returned to his hidden lair, Effie was already awake. Sitting on the bed, she was lazily staring at the ceiling and whistling a cheerful tune. Her long legs were somewhat covered by the blanket, but still, that white chitin of hers was way too revealing. Sonny had to be very careful to look the other way. It was very hard. "Oh, you're back. Good hunt?" Instead of answering, Sonny walked over to his chest, glanced at the huntress with suspicion, and opened it. Then he poured the contents of his rucksack inside. 7 soul shards fell on the pile, which was sadly visibly diminished because of his recent expenses. It was still nothing to scoff at, though. Effie whistled. 7? How many heads is that? Sonny closed the chest and sat on it. 4. 3 monsters and 1 beast. Effie blinked, a bit stunned. 3 monsters? How did you manage to kill 3 monsters in one night? He hesitated, then sighed. Trying to hide the existence of the Stone Saint would be very bothersome, especially if he was going to venture on an expedition with Neff's cohort. Out there in the labyrinth, chances were that none of them would be able to hold back to hide their aces. That was if he was even going to agree to it, of course. Anyway, there would be not much harm in revealing her now, or rather, the benefits outweighed it. I'll show you. Just don't freak out, Effie giggled. I'm pretty sure that nothing you're capable of showing can freak me out. Ignoring her teasing tone, Sonny glared at the huntress and summoned the saint out of his soul sea. Immediately, 2 crimson flames ignited in the depths of his shadow. A moment later, the menacing stone knight stepped from it on the floor of the hidden chamber and turned her head to Effie. Effie recoiled. What the hell is that? The mighty huntress stared at the stone saint, her hand hovering in the air, ready to grasp the shaft of the spear. Her beautiful hazel eyes were full of tension and dark anticipation. The contrast between that fierce pose and the fact that she was still comfortably wrapped in a blanket was so funny that Sunny couldn't help but snicker. Gee, relax. Haven't you seen an echo before? Effie blinked. That thing is yours? Wait, you got an echo? He gave her a nod and gestured at the stone saint. Yes, I did. Meet Saint. Ain't she a beauty? The huntress stared at the taciturn creature, then scowled with outrage. You lucky bastard. You do know that I haven't even caught a sniff of an echo after 3 years in this pit? How dare you get one before me, huh? Sunny laughed. Actually, this was my second echo. The first one got killed in the labyrinth. Effie glared at him for a long time, then shook her head with an expression of utter dejection. Finally, she turned to the shadow and studied her. Wait, is she what I think she is? Sunny nodded. Yeah. The huntress stood up from the bed and, leaving the blanket behind, walked barefoot around the stone saint. She studied her from all angles and then said, How the hell did you manage to kill one of those things and survive? Sunny, who had found himself involuntarily studying Effie from all angles as well, blinked a couple of times and shrugged. Actually, they got wiped out by a group of fallen. It was an epic clash, to say the least. I just happened to be there in time to finish one off, and here we are. Effie stared at the shadow with admiration. What class is she? Sunny smiled. Awakened monster. But I watched her kill 2 fallen beasts, so I'd say she's an elite among her peers. Anyway, you can see how it's not impossible to hunt 3 monsters in one night with her by my side. I studied them in advance, of course. That's why we were so fast in dealing with them. The huntress crossed her arms, thought for a bit, then gave Sunny a strange look. Why are you showing her to me? With how paranoid you are, I'd expect you to keep such a treasure hidden. He stood up, lingered for a moment, then said, With what I have planned, showing her to you is sort of a requirement. Effie grew silent, then gave him a mischievous smile. Sorry to disappoint. Don't get me wrong, I'm up for all kinds of fun. But, Sunny, nightmare creatures is where I draw the line. He frowned, not quite getting what she was talking about. Then his eyes widened. What? What kind of a degenerate are you? Training? I wanted to use her for training. The unruly huntress blinked innocently. Training? Sunny, there's nothing wrong with being a bit inexperienced at your age. In fact, it's quite charming. You don't need to resort to this kind of thing, you know? Inexperienced? Who are you calling inexperienced? I'm plenty experienced. Wait, crap, what are we even talking about? Dying from laughter, Effie left Sunny to fume with outrage and walked over to the makeshift kitchen while shaking her head. Soon, the tantalizing smell of roasting meat filled the air. I'm going to kill her. Should I kill her? It's going to be pure self-defense anyway. A week of this will be the death of me. With a sigh, he tried very hard to calm down. When his thoughts returned to their usual cadence, Sunny stood in front of the stone saint and slowly exhaled. It was time to learn. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. On his way back to the cathedral, Sunny had made a hard decision. He decided not to augment his body with the power of the shadow during his practice with the stone saint. Even though he knew that this was going to bring him a lot of pain in the future, he was adamant about his choice. There were several reasons why he wanted to face his pet monster with his own physical ability and nothing else. The first and most simple reason was that Sunny knew that the shadow would not always be there when he needed it. Just like during the battle against the Spire Messenger, when it had been away scouting, circumstances in which he was going to have to rely on nothing but his own prowess were bound to happen. Not to mention that it had been his own reflexes, and not the shadow, that saved him from being cut in halves by the Black Knight. The second reason was less evident. It had to do with the existing hierarchy of power in the Dark City. At the very top, there were the Fallen. Beneath them, those creatures that were merely awakened, and at the very bottom, sleepers. Any fight that a human could face in that cursed place was going to be against an overwhelming force. With time, Sunny had adjusted to this reality and was able, these days, to face the lower classes of the awakened abominations on almost equal terms, with the help of the shadow. He was still weaker, but not by that much. However, deep down he knew that, sooner or later, he would be forced to fight against fallen enemies. And he was also almost sure that he would have to cross swords with humans that had saturated their cores to the brim with soul essence and were thus much stronger than him. For that reason, his experience hunting monsters who were not much stronger than his augmented self was actually an impediment. It dulled his edge and made him forget what it actually meant to struggle against an enemy who was leagues above him, the knowledge and mindset that he desperately needed to retain to have a chance of surviving the future. He had to keep himself humble. And lastly, there was one truth that he had learned during these 6 months on the Forgotten Shore, and it was that nothing was more beneficial to one's growth than fighting against a superior opponent, especially if that fight ended in your loss. One defeat taught a person more than a dozen victories against weaker enemies would. The problem was that in this cursed place, any defeat meant death, so Sunny actually had little experience losing to someone. From start to finish, he tasted loss only 3 times, once in a battle against the Carapace Centurion, once when he had faced Nephis under the branches of the Soul Tree, and once in this very cathedral, when the Black Knight's sword had sliced his stomach open. Each of those defeats taught him more than anything else did. To light, so, having the opportunity to fight with a monster who was much more powerful than him and yet had no desire to kill him was an extremely rare and precious opportunity. That's why Sunny steeled himself and let the shadow rest on the floor while he faced the stone saint. Taking a deep breath, he summoned the midnight shard, assumed a defensive stance, and looked the menacing stone knight right in the eyes. "Attack me." Not wasting even a second, she did just as she was told. Oh, crap! The shadow attacked with the vicious strength of a true monster. Knowing perfectly well that his strength was not enough to block her sword, Sunny desperately moved the midnight shard to deflect the strike to the side. The countless hours of practice and hundreds of thousands of times he had repeated his katas had not been in vain. His body moved with lightning speed, placing the blade in the path of the Stone Saint's weapon at just the right angle. Feeling the impact reverberate in his bones, Sunny gasped from the pain and stood his ground. Guided by the midnight shard, the shadow's sword glided to the side and missed his body by a wide margin. However, before Sunny had time to congratulate himself, the saint simply continued moving forward and slammed into him. Being hit by her shield felt like crashing into a stone wall at high speed. Flying back, Sunny impacted against an actual wall and rolled to the floor. A small yelp escaped from his lips. Getting distracted from her food for a moment, Effie glanced at him and called, "Sunny, you're alive?" He weakly raised a hand and brought his thumb and index finger together in the shape of a circle. "Yeah," the huntress smiled. "Good. Don't die yet, all right? It's going to be really inconvenient for me to get out of here without your help." Sunny gritted his teeth. Is that all you care about? I'll try." Slowly rising to his feet, he staggered and had to lean on the wall for balance. The stone saint returned to her spot and stood there indifferently, not paying any attention to his furious glare. With a heavy sigh, Sunny walked back to stand in front of her, raised the midnight shard, and spat, "Again. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk." Over the course of the next few days, Sunny often wondered if he had really gone mad. Otherwise, why would he willingly subject himself to this torture? His life now consisted of only three things: spending time with Effie, practicing with the stone saint, and exploring the cursed ruins. Out of the three, the time he was spending in the deadly maze of the Dark City was by far the least dreadful. He even found himself enjoying it a great deal. Once you begin thinking about a cursed ancient ruin teeming with abominable creatures as a comforting place, you should really start thinking about your life choices. And yet, Sonny knew that he was on the right track. Painful as they were, his training sessions with the menacing shadow had turned out to be even more advantageous than he imagined. Every bruise, every cut, every drop of blood that he spilled was making him stronger. After a long period of stagnation, his technique was finally improving again, and it was doing so with noticeable speed. The best thing about it was that he had not even scratched the surface of the immense didactic potential of the attribute. For someone like him, who had never received a formal education in combat, it was simply a boon. It was a hidden treasure. Back when he had observed the shadow in the fight against a carapace centurion, he had noted her distinct battle style. The taciturn creature fought with the firmness of stone, combining flawless defense with devastating offense. Each action was efficient and perfectly calculated, with blocks, dodges, and deflections leading into deadly ripostes. It was solid, indomitable, and inevitable. However, this was not the only battle style that the Stone Saint was perfectly proficient in. Rather, it was something that she used based on her current weapons and opponents. Back when her original fought against two harrowing fallen beasts, her style was reckless and brutal, disregarding any form of defense in favor of an endless onslaught of vicious attacks. Although there were some foundational similarities between them, these two techniques were vastly different. It seemed as though she was able to switch between countless styles to suit the situation. Sonny couldn't wish for a better sparring partner. His own style, or rather the kernel of one that had been given to him by Nephis, was flowing and unpredictable. It focused on adaptability and making it impossible for the enemy to anticipate your next move. The more Sonny fought against the Stone Saint, the more he realized how extraordinary it actually was. However, it didn't mean that this style couldn't be improved. In fact, Sonny suspected that it was actually designed with the intention of being able to incorporate various elements from other sources. If so, it was a perfect foundational style to learn. All of this made him wonder where this strange style had come from, and if Changing Star had taught him its basics for a reason. In any case, he was determined to make sense of it, improve his mastery of the things he had already learned, and begin to incorporate elements of Stone Saint's stock technique into his own. However, this was easier said than done. At first, fighting against the menacing shadow appeared to be almost impossible. Every time he gave her the command to attack, he would inevitably end up on the floor in mere moments, groaning and consumed with pain. His whole body was bruised black and hurting terribly. If not for the tenacious enhancement of the blood weave, Sonny did not know if he would have been able to continue, or at least continue at an acceptable rate. With its help, however, the speed of his recovery was considerably faster. It was almost inhuman. Because of that, he was able to train more intensely and for longer periods of time. Just as he had expected, every defeat taught him something new. Losing to a superior opponent was the best way to improve indeed. Back in the real world, many people were foolishly obsessed with their pride and lived for nothing but to achieve victories against others. Not Sonny, though. He was perfectly content with losing time after time as long as he continued to become stronger with each loss. The only person he wanted to defeat was the version of himself from the last fight, over and over again. Just like that, he had slowly begun to put up at least some resistance to the Stone Saint. At first, he was happy with being able to deflect one attack, then two, then several. Before too long, he stopped counting the number of attacks and started counting the number of seconds he remained on his feet. It was just a couple at first, then 4 or 5, then a dozen. Finally, he was able to fight with the menacing stone knight for vast amounts of time, sometimes even up to a minute. Even Effie seemed to be impressed. She usually paid little attention to his training, but after some time, Sunny noticed her glancing in his direction more and more. At first, he thought that the unruly huntress simply enjoyed watching him suffer in his suffering, but then he realized that she was actually trying to learn from his mistakes too. Sunny didn't mind. His movements slowly became more confident, purposeful, and precise. His body, while damaged and bruised, was brimming with strength and agility. He was maturing. It was then, when his spars with the shadow turned less one-sided, that Sunny noticed something strange. And when he did, everything changed.